Okay, good morning, everybody. Turn to page 179, chapter 31. Miko and I were on the football field all by our lonesomes. The coaches had generously given us a whole day off to rest before the real killer workouts were to begin. Miko still wanted to practice. It had been raining cats and dogs earlier, but had stopped, so I went along with him. Besides, the girls' tennis team was playing their last game away, so it wasn't like I'd be missing time with Rainey. I noticed Miko kept looking out to the street side of the field all during practice. Young said she might stop by, he finally admitted. He looked so glum, I felt bad for him. Don't sweat it, man, I said. She's probably got held up at band or something. They have to practice more now, too. Frankly, I didn't want to get involved. I mean, when they get married, I'll be the first to toast them, but keep me out of the messy details, please. Look, I added, Young never goes for ugly football players, so she must really like you. Not to mention that she's not supposed to date until college. That's nuts. Tell me about it. Rainey's parents have me over for dinner all the time, but I have to be like, well, no, in fact, you can't come over. I'll protract half a smile. See, you're sneaky. What's right is relative, I said. I tossed him the ball, an easy spiral, but for some reason he dropped it. Somewhere in town, a siren sounded, then another, more drawn out. Rrr, fire trucks, All Pro said. Hope it's not Mom and Miss Knutson, I said. The other day, the two of them had been up to some culinary experiment that failed, and it made so much smoke. I thought the fire trucks were going to come. Luckily, Mrs. Knutson thought to dump a box of baking soda on top of it. I'm feeling a little bushed. Let's go home, Miko said suddenly. There was a smell of pot roast unburned in the house when I got home. Where's Young? Her shoes weren't by the door. She's out with Donna, Oma said. She should be home by 5:30. I went upstairs to put my stuff away. At 5:45, Oma joked about withholding dinner from Young, but she didn't return by 6 or 6:30. She was never late. Always on the dot, as Miss Knutson would say. She always called. By 7, we knew something was wrong. Oma called a bogie, and then he came home from the store. We were all sitting silently in the living room. No one moved except for Miss Knutson, who was attempting to do some knitting, but she was strangling whatever it was she was making. The phone rang. We all fell over each other trying to get it. I won. It was Mrs. Leshke, Donna's mother, wondering if Donna was over there. No, she's not. Young isn't back either. I barely whispered into the phone as I hung up and said a silent prayer. Please, God, let Young be all right. I knew she's never late, but let her and Donna be out playing some stupid prank. That's all I asked. The doorbell rang. A man in a police uniform was there. He said he was Joe Scotefold, chief of Iron River Police. I let him in stiffly, formally, as though he were a guest and we were expecting him. My daughter, Oma said, half rising. My daughter, Young, do you know? Sometimes these things just come and you can't stop them. In between the words, your daughter Young, and the rest of the sentence, was killed, hung up mostly ghastly silence I had ever experienced in my life. Someone was yelling, screaming. There was a sound of things breaking. Make them stop, I was thinking. I put my hands over my ears. Make it stop. It took 2 slaps from Baboji to bring me back. When I opened my eyes, it was like observing a scene in a wax museum. Oma and Mrs. Knutson were huddled motionless together on the couch. The policeman stood with his eyes to the floor. Baboji paused, hands still raised. Young was dead. She was not dead. She couldn't be dead. I'm going to contest this play, I was thinking. Show me the instant replay. I'm going to contest this play. I kept repeating that over and over. It was the only way I had of keeping my head from blowing apart into a million pieces. We had to go to the hospital to identify the body. Young and Donna had been in a car accident. The doctor said she was going to be hard to look at. He suggested only Oboji go in. She's my daughter too, Oma said. I took her hand. We all went in as a family. We met Donna's parents outside her hospital room. Donna had broken her back, but she was in stable condition. Thank God for small favors and seatbelts, I was thinking with one side of my brain. The other side was practically screaming with jealousy. Why did Donna get to live and not Young? Why? Aboji and Oma were on the phone constantly to LA and Korea. When they hung up, the phone rang again. Once Miko called. Once Rainey did. I told them I couldn't talk right now, and I acted like I had something pressing to do. Of course it was a lie. Nothing was pressing anymore. The doorbell rang. I made the mistake of answering it, thinking it might be Flowers or somebody bringing food. But no, it was All Pro. I don't want to talk right now, I said, starting to close the door. He put his hand in the jamb, but I do. I hadn't talked to All Pro since before the accident, I realized. The last time he was actually inside the house was when the three of us watched TV that time. I couldn't believe it. I let him in. Have you seen Donna? He asked. I nodded. Did she tell you what happened? He looked different, like his cheekbones poked out more or something. She said she swerved to miss a deer and the car hit a slick patch. The deer lived. What were they doing on the highway? Cursing, cruising, I guess. She just got her license. Was she a good driver? How should I know? I said. Why are you asking me all this? I just want to know. I don't know a thing about what happened except what I saw in the papers. So was Donna a good driver? Hell if I know, I said. It's not like things will change if you figure out exactly what happened. My sister's gone, Miko, gone. I just have to know, All Pro said. His eyes were red. He slammed his fist into each other. Young's dead, I said. The tonelessness of my voice surprised me. The end. All Pro grabbed my shoulders. God damn it, Chan. You're not the only one who lost someone. What about your parents? What about me? So I'll put you out of your misery too. My father owns a gun. I put a nice layer of sarcasm on top of everything to hide my true intentions, whatever they were. Don't do anything stupid, Chan. All Pro's eyes were practically boring right through my head. His nostrils were white. I tried to put myself in his shoes, to experience his loss of Young, but I couldn't. Mine loomed too large, way too large. I'm sorry, was all I could say. Suddenly, Miko leaned over and touched my hair, like you do with a little kid who needs soothing. We gotta be there for each other, buddy, he said. That's all any of us can do. 33. The house was beginning to fill with people, the Kims, the Lees, the Parks, Sujin's parents, and Sujin. Those were the people who could afford to come out here. None of the people in Korea could. Aboji had called his brother Bong, now living in Milwaukee. He was supposed to be coming too. All of them brought food, Korean food. I had basically stopped eating since the accident. We all had. But the longed-for smells of kimchi and namul vegetables were too much for me. Ma, you really like that, don't you? Miss Knudsen put one bird-like hand on my shoulder as she peered at the red, peppery, garlicky, sesame seed expanse of veggies, meat, and rice before me. Glug, I said, mouth full. Miss Knudsen had been amazing in all of this, arranging the funeral at her church, cleaning the house, holding Oma's hand for hours on end. Oma had barely come out of her room since the accident. Now Miss Kay was going to stay with a friend so we could have more room, especially when Bong showed up. We would all be meeting at the funeral. Bong arrived by bus right into Iron River at the gas and carry. Aboji and I went to pick him up. He was the same old Bong, hair stinging up like a rooster's comb, watery smile. He didn't say anything other than hi when we picked him up. Aboji didn't say anything either. Oma asked me if I might say a few words at Young's funeral, but I refused. How could I possibly begin to tell anyone what it was like to lose a person who was more than just your sister, who was more like half of me? I didn't know what to tell myself. I said I let Sujin speak for me. She was good at putting things into pretty words. She was able to tell people what a good person Young was. The house rustled with people moving to and fro, but there was barely a murmur of voices. I put on my sports coat and khakis, my one good outfit. As I dug around for my good shoes, I came across my soccer shoes, still covered in mud from the last game. That game seemed an eternity ago, and so small somehow. I couldn't believe I had put so much time and energy into chasing after a stupid football. When everyone was downstairs, I slipped into Young's room. I almost held my breath when I was in there, panicking that I'd detect some scent, some trace of warmth from when my sister was alive, but there was none. Her room was impeccable, the bed made, the desk clear, with her books stacked, pencils neatly gathered in gold miner's mug, The Korean quilts were completely smooth. I spied what I had come for, grabbed it, and then ran, shutting the door behind me. Oma began to cry before we even reached the church. Aboji and I had to help her into the sand-colored building, the First Lutheran Church of Iron River. Her arm felt as light and fragile as a bird's wing in my hand. Donna's parents were there, but Donna was still in the hospital. Miss Gorski, our math teacher, kneeled in a pew, apparently praying. Rainey waved sadly at me when she saw me. So did All-Pro. I waved back, got into the viewing line. I didn't want to see my sister dead. The idea of an open casket is barbaric to me, but there was something I knew I had to do. When my turn came, I kept my eyes on the brass handles of the casket and carefully laid Young's flute in it. The wailing. Mrs. Park and Mr. Kim and Miss Lee just started wailing, "Agu, agu, agu," and flailing their arms around. Other people in the church, including the Reverend Mr. Hanson, jumped, then stared like they weren't sure what was going on. Agu, agu. Oma had done this at Halmoni's funeral, but not this loud, this intense. The air raid noise went on without stopping for even a second, and I stared to feel like I was going to burst my head from the instant. Aigu, aigu. Make them stop, I wanted to shout. But when I looked over at Oma and Aboji, half expecting them to have their hands over their ears, I saw that they looked strangely calmed, as if these women were doing the noisy and messy grieving they couldn't themselves. Finally, the Reverend Mr. Hanson ascended to the pulpit, and the woman stopped. The Reverend said some words on death and dying, but I didn't listen. He didn't know Young at all. Everything he said reeked of fakeness, especially when he said things like, "This young woman meant so much to us all." Sujin got up next. She was carrying a Korean English Bible, just like Aboji's. She was pale, her black eyes liquid. She opened the Bible on its ribbon and began to read. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to seek, a time to lose. He has put eternity into men's mind, yet that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. That which is already has been, and God seeks what he has driven away. Jesus, Sujin, corny even in her grief. I wished it would rain or snow or do something as we filed out for the trip to the cemetery. But the sky was clear. It wouldn't be long, though, before the ground was completely frozen. We all stood and stared at the casket. Everyone in our family was going to bow in reverse order. The women started wailing, but more quietly this time. As I walked in front of the casket, since I could remember, I had bowed to my parents every Shahi, New Year's. So I sank to my knees and performed a bow without even thinking about how to do it. If Young's spirit was truly around somewhere, she'd probably be laughing at me, practically shoving my face in the dirt from her. Oma and Aboji went next together. Oma, supported by Miss Park and Miss Lee, did a small dip. I could see tears silently flowing down her face. I was thinking of this Korean proverb that Harmony had told me. When parents die, you bury them in the ground. When children die, you bury them in your heart. All of a sudden, Aboji jumped up from the ground and threw himself on top of the casket. A few people gasped. I was stuck to the spot. I was half hoping Aboji would howl and moan and shout and curse the gods so loud that the sky would split open. But he was just crying, making tiny animal noises. I had never seen his face look so shattered, so broken. The whole world seemed to stop. No one knew what to do. Finally, Mr. Park went up to Aboji and touched his shoulder. Mr. Park murmured something and then gently supported Aboji as he led him away from the casket. The casket was lowered, and each of us was given a chance to put a shovelful of dirt on top. I felt a hand on my shoulder and jumped. I looked, but no one was there. Oma and Aboji were both watching the casket, the tears now dry on their faces. There was no breeze. Then it was over. Miko came up and gave me a bone-crunching hug. I held on to him like he was a tree. I was